4 days had settled into the stone of the tomb at Bethany. The air hung thick, stagnant with the scent of dust and the heavy, lingering presence of the end. Martha stood near the entrance, her hands locked together. Every sound in the village felt like an intrusion against the silence of the cave. Then, the sharp crunch of sandals on gravel cut through the stillness. She turned. Jesus was walking toward her. The distance between them vanished in a few quick, desperate strides. She stopped before him, her shoulders shaking, her head dipping low as she spoke. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The words emerged as a jagged confession of lost time. Jesus stood motionless, his gaze fixed on her. "Your brother will rise again." Martha wiped her eyes, her breath hitching as she murmured of the final resurrection. Yet her voice caught on the edge of a question. Jesus took a single step closer. "I am the resurrection and the life," he said. "Do you believe this?" Martha searched his face, her hesitation dissolving into a slow, deliberate nod. She whispered her belief, then turned and retreated toward the village to find her sister. Martha navigated the narrow paths of the village until she found her sister. She leaned close, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. "The teacher is here," she whispered, "and he is calling for you." Mary stood up in one fluid, sharp motion. The stillness that had defined her for days vanished instantly. She turned and strode toward the outskirts of town, her pace rapid, driven by a singular, desperate intent. A crowd of mourners, sensing the shift in momentum, rose from their places and trailed behind her. Dust kicked up in small, rhythmic clouds beneath their feet. When she reached the spot where Jesus stood, she did not stop to speak. She collapsed. Her knees hit the hard earth with a dull thud, and she fell forward, grasping at the ground, sobbing the exact words her sister had spoken moments before. The sound rippled through the gathered crowd. Men and women began to weep, their voices rising in a ragged, discordant chorus of shared loss. Jesus watched them. He saw the faces wet with tears, the trembling shoulders, the raw, unfiltered physical manifestation of their collective agony. His own chest tightened, his breath hitched, and he looked away, his jaw set, his frame stiffening as he absorbed the weight of their sorrow into the quiet space between them. Jesus turned and led the procession toward the cave. The ground sloped upward, leading to a jagged opening sealed by a heavy, unyielding slab of rock. It cast a long, cold shadow over the path, grounding the atmosphere in the permanence of the grave. Jesus stopped before it. He looked at the men behind him, his posture shifting, his intent clear. "Move the stone," he commanded. The air seemed to thin. Martha moved forward, her hands raised in a sharp gesture of protest, her face tight with sudden alarm. "Lord," she said, her voice strained and sharp, "it has been 4 days. There will be a stench." She stood her ground, her body braced against the audacity of the request, her eyes wide as she looked from him to the rock. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the collective memory of the decay within. Jesus did not look back. He turned his gaze toward her, his expression remaining entirely resolute. "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" The reality of the 4 days clashed against the authority in his voice. The men hesitated, looking at the rock, then at the tomb, then at him, paralyzed by the weight of the impossible demand. The men stepped forward, their hands pressing into the rough, uneven surface of the rock. They pushed in unison, muscles corded in their arms, heels dug into the loose dirt, and the stone groaned, a deep, grinding sound of friction that scraped against the silence. It slid, exposing a dark, hollow void that smelled of stagnant earth. Jesus stood directly before the opening. He did not look at the people. He lifted his gaze toward the sky, his frame still, his breathing steady. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me," he said. His voice carried, clear and resonant, cutting through the damp air. He turned back toward the abyss of the cave. The crowd went rigid. Every chest stopped moving. Every eye locked onto the darkness. Jesus raised his hand and shouted, "Lazarus, come out." The sound echoed deep within the tomb, then died. A profound hush followed, so absolute that the wind seemed to cease its movement through the trees. Seconds ticked by, then a shift in the shadows. Something moved. A shape detached itself from the gloom of the interior. A figure shuffled forward, step by heavy step, crossing the threshold from the total blackness of the cave into the sharp, blinding light of the day. Lazarus stood in the patch of sunlight, swaying with the instability of someone who had forgotten the weight of his own bones. He was a statue of linen and salt. His feet remained bound by narrow strips of fabric, his face obscured by the cloth wrapped tight across his eyes and mouth. He stopped, chest rising in a ragged, involuntary gasp that hitched in his throat. The crowd stood frozen, their mouths parted, unable to process the breath that now filled the space between them. Jesus pointed toward the man. "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." The command broke the paralysis. People surged forward, hands reaching out with frantic, uncoordinated energy. They fumbled to find the knots, tearing at the damp, brittle fabric. The linen fell in heavy heaps onto the dust. With each layer stripped away, the pallor of the skin underneath gave way to the flush of blood. Lazarus blinked, his eyes squinting against the sudden brightness of the afternoon. He took a shallow, uneven breath, then another, deeper and steady. The stench of the tomb vanished, replaced by the sharp, clean scent of the earth. He looked at the faces surrounding him, his gaze clear, his chest moving with the undeniable rhythm of the living.